Action. Okay, greetings everybody. This is Ron Mubarak with a personal in-depth interview with Mr. Keith Smalls, aka Rico, his character name in the story. And so I have two questions for Mr. Smalls. The first one is integration. What is your impression of integration, and how has integration impacted you in your life?
Okay, well, first off, it's a pleasure to be here, pleasure to be interviewed by my lifelong friend. First part of that question, I believe integration serves as a bridge to bring communities together. You had kids that grew up in the inner city that weren't exposed to how the other side lived, and vice versa. So my personal experience, it was a good thing. And in terms of how it affected me, I'm eternally grateful for the opportunity to go to school and learn and rub shoulders with people that weren't like me, that didn't look like me. We developed shared experiences, and I was able to show them how I lived and learn from them in terms of how they lived. You find friendships where you find them, and like I said, I'm eternally grateful for that opportunity. I made lifelong connections, and more importantly, it served to bolster my self-confidence just in terms of being in an environment where maybe I was the only one that looked like me, and being exposed to that early on in my high school years kind of just buffered me just in terms of how I navigated, how I was able to deal with people on a professional level, in adult society. It served me well, and it still does.
Very good. What would be as a child growing up, being a part of first generation busing in Los Angeles, what were some of the takeaways that you had interacting with others, and then coming back to your community and interacting with your own?
Well, on the plus side, it's everything that I kind of previously alluded to. You gain something from being around people that don't look like you. You learn things that you might have otherwise not learned going to school in an inner city school. Going to school in a school in your community is what I wanted to say. So yeah, I that served me well in terms of my neighborhood friends that I grew up with that maybe went to their neighborhood schools. There was kind of a disconnect because I saw clearly that they were missing something that I was getting daily. I'm of the opinion that in order to grow, in order to evolve, you have to constantly be receptive to learn, constantly be receptive to new ideas and experiences. And when you're surrounded by people that only look like you, that's not a bad thing. Don't get it twisted. But you don't really grow, in my opinion, like you would if you were around new experiences, new people. Like I said, people that don't look like you, that don't think like you, that didn't grow up like you. So for me, I saw the stark contrast when I came back home and interacted with, the homies in the neighborhood. They were missing something that I was getting every day.
And what about you? Did you feel like there was a disconnect on your part because you didn't grow up with them and have the same educational experience, or maybe you did grow up like them, but there was a point of departure that you sort of developed because of your experience being bused?
Sure. I found it fascinating that most of my friends that shared my experience shared my mindset, just in terms of what we all went through, how we all processed what we were going through. all of us had the same optics on the situation. There was a lot of time where I felt like I didn't really fit in either camp. And for a long time, I looked at that as detriment. It was once I became an adult and truly understood how the world worked that I realized that that was a strength.
Beautiful. And lastly, Keith, aka Rico, what's the impact, or what do you want the audience, the viewer, once this movie is complete, what do you want them to get from this particular film? What's the message?
To understand that we grew up in a magical time, a beautiful time, a horrible time. We were definitely products of our environment, but we were blessed to be coming of age in a time where our whole country was experiencing a shift. And specifically where I grew up in Los Angeles, there was a dynamic that I haven't seen since, where the music crossed boundaries, the clothing crossed boundaries, what we thought we knew. It was a beautiful time because there was a confluence of just ideas and thinking that I had, like I said, I haven't seen since. From the music that we listened to the clothing that we wore, there was something for everybody. The expression "you can get in where you fit in," it definitely applied. And I think more than anything, I hope this movie kind of shows where we come from and what we went through, what we experienced to shape us into the adults that we are now.
Excellent. And lastly, you being an original member of both the Stony Boys and the KODs, King of Drag, how do you perceive those groups in those days as being an alternative to what we had on the streets in the gangland wars that were happening throughout South Central Los Angeles? And how do you compare those groups to what you see the youth involved in today?
Well, it was a natural progression. They called us the preppy gangs, quote unquote. It was a natural progression because myself and people that grew up like me, my neighborhood, it was a gang neighborhood, but there were elements that kept me from jumping all the way into that. That wasn't where I wanted to be. I like to think I had enough sense to understand that that wasn't for me. But I had so much angst in me and so much untapped energy that I needed to let out. I needed an avenue. And for me personally, what we were into, it evolved, it morphed. It started out as something where your comrades could get together and have fun and have shared experiences and just enjoy being with each other. And that just slowly morphed into our love of music, our love of competition. We were all aggressive. You know, we all needed an outlet. And for me, that fit.
That's real talk, man. That's real talk. Thank you so much, Stoney.
Absolutely.
Have a good one.
Right on.